Hello everyone, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you for joining me. My name is Conrad Rogas. I'm welcoming you to episode 111. Today is January 19th, 2025. It's Sunday morning, late into Saturday night. This episode is about transgender health. It's about children's health, really, first and foremost. It's about the children. It's about what kind of a world we're leaving to our children. I'm going to keep the intros really brief because of how important it is this week. It's like one of the most important shows I've done. So I really want to just get right to it and don't want to lose anybody new. All of the problems in this world, all of the tyranny in this world, everything that's wrong, if you really condense it down, you could really present it as health. It comes down to health. It comes down to, is the prerequisite for life, for human life, met? Which means, are we living, are we thinking, feeling, and our relationships manifesting in a healthy way? So all the problems, the things we need to fix could be addressed as health, is the first point. The second point is all of the stuff that we're going to talk about, all of the stuff you can talk about, and all of our experiences in life. Ultimately, when it's all said and done and the dust settles, it's going to get left to the children. The children are going to inherit this world that we are leaving them. All of our triumphs, all of our failures, everything that, ultimately, what is the meaning of it all? Your individual life has meaning. Your happiness has meaning. Your choices have meaning. But you will leave the earth at some point, and it will be all up to those that are living, that are children now. So it's so crucial what kind of a world we leave to them. What it's not really about a legacy, but it's a living legacy. So what are the consequences of our actions going to come down to when it's all said and done, and we're not here anymore to defend ourselves? We will no longer have that will to change, to express ourselves. So I got a must-see video that I just have to share, and I'm doing this episode instead of talking about the wildfires or the Trump inauguration or anything like that, because people got to see this, and this is the main issue. And it's only right because the last few weeks I haven't had any audio or video content. I've really just kind of got up in front of this microphone and rattled episodes out, because that's the choice I've made. I'm going to do an episode every week no matter what happens in my life. What's been happening in my life is, in addition to just, personal stuff and work, I'm preparing for my presentation at the Funnel Conference. I'd like to, again, thank the organizers. I'd like to implore you to check out the Funnel Conference, which is going to be February 22nd and 23rd. And I will be delivering a presentation, a pre-recorded presentation that is called The Sonic Divorce, Man's Estrangement from Nature's Music. It's a presentation about music and how important that is for life. So that's been taking up most of my attention and effort. But this episode, I am going to put that post-production time in to cut the clips in so you could see what I think is crucial to see. It's a recent episode from a podcast called Gender, a Wider Lens. And this is a podcast, a show where two women who have experience in therapy and psychology, they talk about what is going on with the transgender phenomenon, especially pertaining to children. There are two organizations I would point to as sponsors of that podcast. These two women, by the way, it's Stella O'Malley and Sasha Ayad. And you could check out, I'll link them, GenSpect. GenSpect is an organization that's like an evidence-based approach to trans issues. And then also there's another organization, you can go to their website, therapyfirst.org. Therapy First is for the treatment, to help kids, but it's a non-medicalization. It's a non-medical approach. Okay, they're a bit different. It's not the point, right? The point is, they did an episode where they interviewed a woman who is a Houston former Democratic representative, a legislator, a state legislator, and her name is Shawn Thierry. This video is called Mercilessly Attacked for Not Wanting to Transition Children with Representative Shawn Thierry, episode 201. Now, an interview with a politician who is, by the way, you'll see her, so no introduction needed. I've been really dismissive of politicians, right? Of course, we know this. If you've seen my episodes, nothing has changed other than, hey, I'm not going to cross somebody out just because they're in government, right? There's so much to take from this person and from the story. So I hope nobody gets caught up in what political party she's, what that history is, what it ultimately means with political alliances, because it's not the point. And it's also not a full endorsement of her, really, right? I'm not saying I agree with everything she's ever going to do in life. But anyway, this woman, Shawn Thierry, she's actually a lawyer, not a lifelong politician. And really, she slipped under the radar, in my view. In my view, she became a legislator because I personally think that she just didn't trigger any red flags because she's a black woman. I really think they didn't expect her to stand up for herself and stand up for the truth when it came to this issue with transgenders and children. And that's because it is expected that black women and women in general, but black women especially, go along with the progressive agenda. And let me be just real accurate with terms. When I say they, who is they? That's always the question, right? Who's they? They are people from all levels of society, of money, of nation, of race, and they're part of a shared project to project an ideology onto the world. And these people, they see politicians as their troops, like they're troops on the ground. They're like the agents that are going to bring that goal into effect. And what is the progressive agenda? Well, that's the goal. That's the ideology, right? And it's a worldview of utopianism, and a kind of utopianism that's going to be achieved by various levels of collectivist intervention. It's very external, okay? It's got to be introduced by some entity, central government, as opposed to an individual drive, okay? So it's a specific type of utopianism, and it manifests as socialism, authoritarianism, environmentalism, sustainability, and now transgender ideology. Okay, that's what it is. And she was told within the Democratic Party, she's a Democrat, that she better fall in line and get this agenda across and vote for this to not have a minimum age for basically gender reassignment surgery. So she was told to just vote as the party votes, how she's supposed to. And they underestimated her intelligence, they underestimated her courage and her moral foundation. And in my view, that's because she's a black woman, and I don't focus on race at all, because I know how it gets. But here, it actually matters to me. Like the racial aspect matters, and I'm going to point it out. And she's going to talk about it too. But in no uncertain terms, I got to point out, because I've said this is where the racism is, especially rampant. It's inside these intellectual circles, inside these progressive and government circles. It's the same people that preach to us all the time and call us racist. This is they want to lecture the masses of people about racism and what they're doing wrong and all of this, but amongst themselves, they are actually very materialistic. There's a lot of racism there. There's a lot of this type of thinking. And it makes me think, thou doth protest too much, these motherfuckers. They try to put it all on us and project it on us and regular people. They want to throw the label racist or anti-Semite at you when this is where there's so much of it. But I'll come back to that. It's not a main issue here. She voted for, she voted against gender reassignment surgery for children, among other things. And actually, I'm gonna link a speech that she gave, because she gave this, very moving, emotional speech about being in opposition to this thing. This happened last year, I believe, and I'm gonna link it anyway. But you could tell she is very distraught. She's like shaking as she's giving the speech, and that's because she was receiving like death threats a couple days before people found out within her party. So of course she was attacked for this, both politically and personally, and then she ended up leaving the Democratic Party, flipping to Republican to make a statement. Of course she was called a traitor and all these things, and I'll let you hear her talk about it. But I like this. We shouldn't have People shouldn't have any loyalty to a political party. A political party is not something to be loyal to. You should be loyal to principles, and you can work together with people like a party if they align with principles. Okay, so let's begin. She's going to talk about the progressive abyss.
I got elected to become a member of the Texas legislature in 2016, was sworn in 2017 as a Democrat. Folks asked me to run because they just saw my work in the community. And I think they thought that I would be a great advocate for the elderly, for children. I spoke heavily and passed major pieces of legislation on anti-human trafficking. I ended up taking the lead on protecting women in childbirth, maternal mortality. So all of these things were fine at the time, but I did notice a fraction growing in the party. From the moment I was sworn in, session after session, I saw the Democratic Party move further and further to the extreme, to the left. It's not even, I don't even think it's fair to just say the left. It is some sort of, I've come up with a name. I call it the progressive abyss because it has no end. Yes, it just goes on and on and on until you just eventually slide off of a cliff. Yeah. And that's where we are. And so last session is when I had to say, stop, I have to get off here. I can't go sliding off the cliff with you and take millions of children with me, when the Democratic Party decided that they were going to draw a line in the sand and say that as it relates to the transgender issue, that children now should be getting sex change surgeries. Children as young as 8 years old should be taking puberty blockers. Children as young as 12 should be taking estrogen and testosterone. The opposite sex, should I say. Girls taking testosterone. And I was asked to advocate for that. And that's when I said, this is harmful. This is child abuse. There's no ands, ifs, buts about it. People like to complicate it, but it's not. And so I spoke out against it. I voted for the bill that very reasonably set the age to 18, just like many other pieces of public policy across our nation. Yeah. And I won't do the spoiler alert, but immediately afterwards, I was mercilessly attacked by the progressives. And I eventually switched parties, not for political expedience or acumen or alliances, but to make a statement that I no longer align with this party if this is their value system.
It's kind of a unique situation. She's not a career politician, but she was embraced as one. And she observed these Democrat positions on these issues, specifically children and gender. She observed them change and go way too far. And I really like her phrase, the progressive abyss. It's such a great term because an abyss is something that has no defined end. It has no real goal or finality. You just throw more and more into it and you never really hit the bottom. You don't even know how deep it goes. And what she is saying, others have pointed it out, In fact, for me, it's quite common to hear people in the public spotlight say this, like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, I'm sure I've heard. And it goes like this. I used to be Democrat. I used to believe in classical liberalism. But the party has moved so far and they've gone crazy. They've moved so far from what it used to be, equal rights and so on and so forth. And now they consider me conservative but I never really flipped. I haven't changed what I believe. And the first and second time I heard that, I appreciated that point and that logic, okay, of staying. I'm the one that stayed firm, attached to my principles. They are the ones that shifted. I like that because I also see the change occurring and the shifting of the political spectrum. I see this happening. It's like those old school scales, the counterbalance scales, where you move the weight over and you have the little box, and then it balances out and shows you how much you weigh. This is like what's happened with the political spectrum, right? It's just there's a left and a right, but it's not the same. We're not reading the same numbers. We're like way over here, right? So okay, fine. But the seventh and eighth and ninth and 10th time I hear people say this, it's starting to drive me nuts because it's so surface level and it doesn't tell the full story. And what I mean by that is people are just incredulous to the fact that it's not just been hijacked. It's not that oh my God, what's happened to the Democratic Party? It's gone so nuts. This is what liberalism is, has been, and is designed to do. It's not that some great shift has happened or a change of direction. The direction is consistent. Government has not been hijacked by bad actors. This is where it's going to go. These are like the late stages of a progressive illness, like alcoholism. It's just like alcoholism, actually. It's just like addiction. Where the initial stage of a dependence, it actually gives you like benefits and rewards. Like when you first drink or you do another drug, it gives you like an emotional freedom, like a lightness and courage, like ability to deal with daily life. You may even get better at doing certain things. You're like, oh, this is like a medicine. It's really helping me. But of course, these initial rewards, they turn into punishments quite quickly. And then the drink no longer has the effect that it used to. And now you have to take your fourth and fifth drink. And that's part of some process that's actually destructive now. But the attachment is too strong for you to see that the reality is that currently I'm in a destructive cycle, and whatever I thought that it was at first, whatever benefits I thought I was getting at first, it definitely is no longer that right now. And the painful truth is that it'll never go back to being that way. Once you get caught in the cycle like that, you can never just take a break and go back to the kind of the golden first drink. It'll never go back to being that way. So, sure, the original, civil rights or women's rights, the initial liberal legislation, it was common sense and it was good. At the surface level, it was, equal voting rights and non-segregation. Who can argue with that? I'm not arguing with that. See, but we should have never been in a society in the first place where people are held back in that way and put into a box. And really the issue was they didn't have the same right of self-defense as another person. See, they didn't need government help. They just needed to be able to protect themselves from violence and abuse. That's all it is. But, those pieces of legislation that everyone seems to agree with, they were really like the first drink. That just because something is pragmatic or expedient or is going to get you a good result in the immediate sense doesn't mean it's not part of something that is a destructive process. And it blows my mind that people just don't go back further in history, because civil rights movement, everyone seems to think that was universally good. People forget that the 60s, it really kind of marked the beginning of the destruction of the black community, right? Like what turned into fatherless homes and abortions and the gangs and the drugs and prison, how many the gang beef, how many black men just kill each other and it totally just destroys the community. And again, this is getting worse. And this is coming from somebody that loves the gang life, the gang mystique. This is what I gravitated to. And even that has gotten so much worse now, where the music is now, there's so much just openly taunting people, like taking pictures like next to people's fallen family members and desecrating their graves. Like, this is what people talk about, and it's just like so, it's just like such a joke and a mockery to, just like basically taunt somebody to get revenge on you. So it's just the genocide has gotten so mindless. It's no longer even like like Shook One's Part Two. When I used to, when I was growing up and I was listening to this, and I would gravitated to this kind of cowardly hearts and straight up shook ones. He ain't a crook, son. He's just a shook one. Like that. That was something to me, right? But it's just, even that was promoting genocide and mutual destruction, and it's just gotten progressively worse. Women's suffrage, these women rights movements, and the initial feminism. Nobody, nobody really speaks out against that, but it was the beginning of the lowering of women's quality of life, and the lowering of their happiness step by step. And I'm not saying you got to be traditional and get in the kitchen, but people just think women are so happy these days and so empowered because the choices they have. But most women are absolutely not happy. They are either suffering or they're living a hollow existence that is not actually rewarding. And then neither are the men. Obviously, the men are much less happy these days. And that's what happens when you separate the genders from each other and separate them from themselves. Right? This is where it ties back into the whole transgender thing with children. We're not just separated from the opposite sex, we're separated from like ourselves. Like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Right? But everybody wants to act like they're happy, and maybe even worse, a lot of people have never even experienced true happiness, or don't no longer remember what happiness is. But it's I really don't mean to be sour on the world, because I do experience a lot of happiness in my life. So I'm not saying the world isn't beautiful, but I'm saying that as far as the relationships go and kind of meaning, the world having meaning, everyday life being meaningful to you, that's severely lacking. It's almost like when that color television replaced black and white television, like in that time period, long before I was born. It seemed like around that time, when technology and production increased so much, that we had like a million new concepts and ideas introduced. We had all of this world open to us. And then through the TV, we got a direct line to government programming. See, what used to just be a voice on the radio and you had to go to the movies to see, or you had to take a trip to the town square, now it became this heavy, multi-level, intense stimulation in your own living room. So it's like, instead of sniffing a line of this drug, you're like injecting it direct line into your bloodstream. And that, with the television, it's just the tip of the iceberg, because it's in all aspects of life. All the dystopian novels, like Brave New World, Atlas Shrugged, and then all these warning signs that were sounded by the whistleblowers, like None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and so many more of these books. It's this agenda to control humanity and basically plug it into an idea machine, a life mimicking simulator. And again, that's what drugs and medication does. It slowly takes over and puts itself in place, implants itself into the body, and takes a function away from the body. Replacing the natural mechanism with an artificial one. And the first video I ever made, I made about this. It's world institutions becoming a system of control that you're depending on, just like you're dependent on a chemical or drug. It works the same way. Addiction or dependency, it gives you a shortcut to a certain pleasurable feeling, or a convenience or satisfaction or comfort. But behind the scenes, what it actually does is it replaces the actual natural mechanisms that give you those rewards and that are necessary for life. And this goes to like prescription drugs, like I don't know, I don't want to just throw out examples out there, but you like an anxiety medication, right? It's going to, what can it really do? It's going to produce those calming neurotransmitters that should be getting produced anyway, but it's going to, instead of healing the body to fix the imbalance or fix clear some toxins or kind of replenish it and make it produce what it's supposed to produce, it's going to produce an artificial version and then actually shut down the body's production of it even more. It's like if you don't use one limb of your body, the muscles are going to atrophy, and they're going to stop working, because if you're not working it out, if you're not actually using it, it's going to stop working. So this happens, this process of dependency, when it implants itself in the host, it drains the host's resources until both the host and the parasite are dead. So it's a mutual destruction, and that is the philosophical and spiritual diagnosis to all the world's problems, all of them, all the things that are wrong, that we need to change in the world. They're just, the idea behind it all is self-destruction. There's a self-destructive idea that is ruling the world, and when ideas become dynamic, right? When people put ideas into practice, they're called spirits. So when ideas take a form, they actually become entities. That's what we call that. And this is the spirit or entity that rules human beings today, and it has for the past like few thousand years, right? It's just a refusal to be, a refusal to be present in the moment, which means to take responsibility of yourself. That's how I see that idea. This is the reason people rob each other. This is the reason people kill each other. Why people are unhappy. Why they move toward the things that poison them, but move away from the things that heal them. Why we seem to sabotage ourselves. Why we vote for people in government, and we follow people that are actually out there for our, not for our benefit, but our enslavement. It's that self-destructive idea. This is that refusal to be present and make decisions for you. But anyway, we all of that because we talked about the progressive abyss. The progressive abyss just means it's just business as usual. It's nothing new. And I'm going to play the next clip, and we're going to go from the progressive abyss to the adulting of children.
Can I just ask a couple things? So when you were initially kind of a legislator, that was 2017, right? When you started to see this progressive sliding, as you described it. And that's interesting. We often kind of ask people about timelines because it did seem like there was, at least in the gender world, 2015, 2016, 2017 is when we really started to see a lot of pressure from trans activists, some things kind of becoming more in the public consciousness. So that's very interesting. And I'm curious for you, was the progressive abyss that you describe mostly because of the advocacy for medicalizing children, or were there other progressive issues that you saw kind of sliding into an abyss?
There were multiple issues. They were all moving on the fast track. I believe their primary issue from the activists was the transgenderizing medically of children. However, parallel to that, which is, I believe, the whole agenda, was the over-sexualization of children at a very young age. I called it the adulting of children, where the whole purpose was to, session after session, blur the lines between what is a child and what is an adult. We saw it with books. I also voted for HB 900, which was a very reasonable bill, which simply put ratings on books that were sexually explicit so that they would be age appropriate. Now, this was in public schools, taxpayer dollars. We found, it was shocking, hundreds and hundreds, I guess I would say in the thousands of titles of passages of content that I would not be allowed to read on the house floor because it was so obscene, so profane, many of it flat out pornographic. In fact, when I tried to read some of it, I was told to stop, representative. This is inappropriate.
Yeah.
I would go to other representatives, and these activists said it was censorship, but they didn't want to acknowledge that it was no different than putting a rating on a movie where a child shouldn't see a rated R movie. At least there's a warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That this is not a rated X movie. Who would take a 9-year-old to go see that? So we noticed that parallel to that, it was the sexualization of children. It became biological males and women's sports. It was drag queen shows for children to watch. All of this was moving at the same time. But I believe the hill that they really are still prepared to die on is this medicalization of children, giving children drugs, poisoning their bodies, and then eventually amputating body parts.
So I totally agree with her that this is a big problem, that we don't let kids be kids. Children are getting so much homework now. Like on Friday nights, they're doing homework, and then all of them has a phone and with all the accounts, so they have to like worry about keeping a persona, like maintaining a reputation, like a profile. And it's in all aspects of life. For me, it goes way beyond this idea of just sexuality. It pertains to life in general. It's like society wants to act like a child has all the faculties and information to make irreversible decisions, and they don't. And I call this, it's just overexposure, right? When you're born and you're alive, being alive means you have access to rewarding and stimulating experiences, not just with the 5 senses, but all kinds of perceptual and conceptual experiences, right? Everybody has a right to that, to feel good. That's an unalienable right of all living creatures. A child has just as much of a right to do that as an adult, to do what feels good, to eat what you want, to touch what you want, all these things, right? But of course, a child is such a fragile and delicate creature, physically, emotionally, and mentally, that if they're exposed to all of the world's stimuli, it's actually going to harm them. They're not going to develop properly. Overstimulation is harmful. It just is. They can't have loud noises. They can't have the kind of like rough physical activity, like this. Nor can they be exposed to sexual ideas when children are in the stage where there's a lot of, developing your identity, individual identity, as well as social identity that is gender specific. So like, especially we're talking school ages, like when we get past the general playground stage, play stage, to the stage now where boys and girls start to look different and act different, right? And kind of separate into groups. And that, of course, then continues into your teenage years where, teenagers start to take on that adult world and prepare for it. And I'm just making that point. I want to be detailed about it because I want to make sense of like what is right and what is not right as far as what we expose children to, because I don't think people know. Like, what, obviously I'm not a parent, right? So it's, I'm kind of hesitant on this, but it's just common sense that, when you have a baby, then obviously, you don't, a baby does not even notice or know the difference, that doesn't even know what all these ideas are, right, about sexuality and gender and all that. But as they're getting older, right, you've got them at like now school age, like this is a privacy thing, like that privacy is very important. It's very important for a child to have their own room, to there's this area that just you kind of have to back off and just let them figure it out and not expose them to that stuff until they're older, and then they can expose themselves to it. It's a difficult topic I'm tackling, okay? But I mean this. And I'm gonna say it again. Like I'm just saying it because I feel like parents just don't know. I feel like parenting is in the Stone Age. How we see children in general, it's just so caveman like. See, I think like other cultures, like indigenous cultures, and just in different parts of the world, they got a better view of children than we do because they just do it mostly like ancient people. They did it mostly on instinct. And I'm not saying that trusting your instinct is all we should ever do and that's always going to work, but I'm just saying that as a general rule, nature is going to point you to the right direction, especially when it comes to health. So when it comes to health and parenting, trusting your instincts is like probably the best thing. Now in the Western world, we've totally gone away from instinct. We do things the opposite of what feels right. We do baby nutrition in a certain way. We make mothers give birth a certain way. We take the babies, put them in the box in a separate room. Then we turn them to the experts on guidelines for health. We're going to come in for our checkup, do the scans. And then for parenting, we basically treat children like little versions of adults, like little versions of ourselves. And we've kind of gone away from that. Like things are changing. This is maybe 30 years ago was much more so like this, but still it's mostly the case. And the thing with the immunizations, now that's totally what we do is just, it's actually so sad. But in other words, all I'm saying is we're totally clueless of how damaging certain things are to children, how fragile a children is, how damaging it is for a baby to be away from their mom, how damaging it is to leave a baby crying by themselves for a while, even for a few seconds, how traumatic indifference and abandonment is as a kid's growing up. And this is all changing slowly, but too slowly. There's still such a shortage of like solid parenting philosophy, especially when it comes to the mind. And the mind is totally in the Stone Age when it comes to that. And how do we introduce the concepts of sexuality to our children? I don't think anybody knows. Especially not knowing how to deal with the way it's all gone off the rails in the 21st century. With the way things are now, Parents are totally lost. And I honestly, I feel for all the parents because I know it's not easy, I spent a lot of time babysitting these boys that are awesome, and they're awesome. But you have to have 3 boys on your head for a couple hours. You're gonna get tested, let alone day in and day out with all the struggles of life. So look, I'm not preaching to any parents. I know that you're the ones that are having this like the hardest challenge probably that you can have in the world is all the challenges of being a parent and all that, and I get that. But that doesn't mean that what I'm saying is not just objectively true. So now, subjectively, according to me, I just feel like children should be free to explore sexuality and gender on their own. But overexposure by adults is wrong to me. Any of these taboos or concepts introduced to children are only going to hurt them moving forward. It's a very personal journey of discovery that should be led by the individual's own curiosity, should be the driving force. But then of course parents should teach their children about, they should educate their children about sexuality when prompted, right? So if a kid wants to know, hey mom, hey dad, what is this? So that's almost never, right? That would almost never happen. But if they're curious, then yes, obviously, right? So again, this is the kind of, I also think you should follow your instincts there. Just leave them alone, because with these ideas, it's like early exposure and intense overexposure and this kind of like pressure of concepts that you don't fully understand. It's I think it's responsible for all the issues in the future. My personal view is no sex education. It should never be told to 5th and 6th graders in a group of people, like in a group, boys and girls with each other, as they're trying to kind of, develop their social identities. It's just a very personal thing. At first, it starts out personal, and then it becomes a shared thing between two people. And that's all it should be, two people. And that's what would happen naturally. And then Shawn, Thierry, she, like so many of us, we just get this. We just instinctually know and feel that the over-sexualization of children is wrong, the adulting of children is wrong. We sense that all the accesses to all the fetishes and the pornography for teenagers, that it's wrong, it's going to hurt them, it's going to damage their future, it's going to, damage their future potential. We know that, but how many of us know why that is, and how many of us can explain it this way? And I'm not saying that I know everything. I'm not saying that you should just accept what I'm saying, but it's your responsibility as an adult to figure out where you stand on that, and you be able to defend it. Okay? That's all it is. Because again, these kids, it's like we don't know what to tell them. And I think this is a problem. It's not just this generation. Our parents were the same, and then it's just like generation after generation. It seems like we really don't think about the questions, the fundamental questions of where we stand, what we believe. And we need to do that. We need to figure out where we stand, because the reality is that my generation and the generation older than me, already is largely destroyed when it comes to relationships and happy families. The birth rate is dropping in all this, broken homes. I mean, and then the generation younger than me is horrifically damaged, and they're hurting. They're even more separated because of these ideas. And then when there's a group of people pushing that idea, and it's part of an entire agenda, I call that war. I'm in a war. We're in a war right now. So, respectfully, I'm going to use Shawn Thierry's term, adulting of children. And I'm going to say, fuck that. Let's call it what it is: harmful overexposure. It's very clear what it is. It's an overexposure, just like if you get overexposed to certain minerals, you can overdose on them and poison the body. So it's a poisonous overexposure that is going on. We need to grow up real quick to figure out what's actually right when it comes to parenting. We need to talk about it more with each other, because we're losing the war. It's we're losing the children, and it's going to be over with before we even get started. So I'm going to go back and let Shawn Thierry tell you about how it got like this, which is a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Oh, when you say they, who are you talking about there? Or is it kind of vague that there is a group out there, or is it just this feeling that the Democrats are kind of sliding into something that they're not quite sure that what they're doing?
I think that's a great question, Stella. Some folks have asked me, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the Democrats that started this and then they went and found the activist groups, or was it the other way around? Obviously, I don't have a complete crystal ball, but what I fundamentally believe, because I was a Democrat for so long and we weren't hearing this, it is that there were certain transgender activist groups that are coalesced, not just in America, around the world. I mean, we see this in Australia, and all of this started in Europe. And now, Europe is backing away from it. They've caught on. And then they came on over to the United States, which we were really on the tail end. We're really usually on the forefront of things, but we're on the tail end of this radical movement. And so this transgender ideologist groups, they decided that I believe they paired up with what they felt would be sympathetic groups, such as, lesbian and gay groups, who traditionally were more aligned with the Democratic Party. And they tried to mask this as a human rights issue. So the Human Rights Campaign got involved. And before you know it, and it was very surreptitious. It was and duplicitous, should I say. They started to put it in. This is why there's all this controversy about DEI, diversity and equity. Typically, that was, back in the old days, that was about race and sex, making sure that women weren't being discriminated in the workplace and that African Americans weren't being discriminated. Well, the word inclusion came in, and the I. And what that really started to mean was this whole transgender ideology. It wasn't just lesbian and gay. I mean, it was transgender. That is when they went through corporate America and started insisting that people use certain pronouns. And then I think the real coup d'etat of it all, and this is still a problem, and the bill that I voted for doesn't address this problem, was going into the school systems. The ultimate, the indoctrination of kids.
This is a great conversation, and I love these women talking about it who don't have the crystal ball. And the crystal ball is, I have the crystal ball. All it is just a knowledge of the occult and a lineal history of rulership on Earth. If you just go back and get that's kind of the missing piece. But they're figuring it out without that, right? Without having the Michael Tessarion, Mark Passio background. And it's great. Now, this idea of it coming from Europe first, a lot of this transgender children stuff, it came from Europe first, and America was on the tail end. But usually America's at the forefront of things, of trends. And it is technologically, economically, culturally. But when it comes to the progressive ideology, when it comes to socialism, when it comes to globalism, it always comes from Europe. And it continues to. And this is, again, lineal history. It comes from the English, French, and German ideologues and groups. Today you have so many of them. Let's just trace it backwards. Nowadays there are so many. Like you could say United Nations, WEF. But Institute for the Future is a good one. You should check out Institute for the Future. They have great, nice websites and good PR campaigns nowadays. But if you go 100 years ago, then the Frankfurt School, the Frankfurt School over there in Germany is like a perfect example. Marxism in general, Bolshevism in general. The Bavarian Illuminati 300 years ago. This is one of these societies. Then the pre-French and pre-American Revolution utopian secret societies like the Perfectibilis and other ones that I don't have their names. They were secret back then because then when you go all the way back then, there was a king still before the revolutions. So these people were like anti-monarchy revolutionaries. They were just like very egalitarian, utopianism, like we're gonna create a perfect world where there's no rich and poor and all this. It's a very interesting investigation. But you take that all the way back to the ideological inner order of the Knights Templar, and it really goes all the way back to the Knights Templar, and it's even older than that. But that's why the transgender ideology comes out of Europe. Just like the sexual revolution came out of Europe. Specifically, it came out of the Marxism of Europe. And that's mainstream historical knowledge, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. But it's, that's there. So that is your they. Again, this is who they are. It's like you can literally investigate and see. As for how it got like this, it's a good question. Like, is it just the Democratic Party that came up with this? Is it these groups that kind of turned, these advocacy groups and think tanks that turned the political party to be this way? And I like that Shawn Thierry, she identifies this as a partnership, because it is. The politicians and the transgender advocacy groups, and then ultimately schools as well. And the partnership is based on what seems to align with egalitarianism, with equality, and with empathy, right? And I agree with this. I think this is true because in my view, no one today gets like direct orders from Lord Rothschild or Klaus Schwab. Like, he doesn't come out there and say, execute order 66, you must fulfill our demands. Like, people don't, I don't think that's what's going on. And that's why people that are involved in the higher levels of the agenda, they think there is no agenda. They think we're crazy, even though they're actually in it, because these alliances form in the world without anybody actually like forcing it. You would think that it just happens naturally, but it's not that it happens naturally. It's just what they don't see is the actual human beings who introduce and promote the ideas that create the conditions for those alliances to form seamlessly. Okay, it's just like little fans and that are guiding like this massive air, right? It's like they're currents. They're like these little underwater structures that are pushing the water a certain way, and then you see this big wave and you think, wow, that's a force of nature. Little do you know, it was actually, created to be that way because of controlling the environmental conditions. And that's what happens when there's a knowledge differential. So it's like, imagine if I'm sitting on my porch and I got chickens in the yard. Like, that's us human beings, the masses of people, were the chickens. And you got somebody out there that's got the chickens in the yard, and they push a button on their phone, and it triggers like a string to get cut on the roof of a shed where the chickens are. And then the string was holding like a big rock, and the rock rolls down, and then it falls on top of the chickens' heads, and none of the animals that would see that would ever know or put it together that I'm the one who killed the chicken. Because they just don't know the mechanism that's at work. And that's what's going on in the world. Nobody sees the puppet masters because they're so removed from what's going on, and they're not even doing anything. They're just pushing forward the ideas for it to happen, and just they're the beneficiaries because they know how the cookie's gonna crumble. All right, it's complicated, but it's simple. This is a very simple thing. So this is good, and I want to talk a bit about language too. The importance of what words we use and how the words we use, they completely change the world. It's another thing that I love about Shawn Thierry is that she speaks so simply, clearly, simple language. I think one of the main qualities of intelligence is to be able to take both simple and complex ideas and make them presentable in a simple way, direct way. So here's this.
When you hear these groups say, my 4-year-old told me that they're non-binary, how would they know what that word is? That's not common vocabulary for a 4-year-old. And as a parent, if you didn't say that, if you didn't teach them that, which many parents are the culprits, but for those that are not, where are they hearing this type of language? And so the ideologues have made a very clever use of language to make this seem very charming and benign.
Yeah.
And that is how they've gotten kids to start thinking that this is what they are.
I would love to pick up on that point because this is actually a very common dynamic. I do a lot of consultation with parents whose kids are going through this identity questioning. And something I hear a lot, and Stella, I'm sure you've heard this too. Parents will say, my kid is so smart. They know all this language. They have all of these words.
Yeah.
They have all these definitions. And like just the other day, I was consulting with a parent who said, I tried to challenge my child on this, and my child said, this is the same thing as segregation, like about the trans women in sports thing. So I think it's nefarious, to be honest, the way young kids who don't really understand the complexity of like racial struggle and all of our civil rights, history, how they're being given these very simplistic parallels, supposedly. And I think the kids are in some ways innocent. They're captured. They don't really know any better. And they parrot out these phrases and these analogies without understanding anything. And in my experience, sometimes parents feel so caught off guard, they don't even know how to answer that. So I mean, what do you think about that? Especially, I've heard you talk about your parents and their experience in the civil rights struggle. Like, how baffling is it to hear like 14-year-old suburban kids make that parallel when they don't know what they're talking about at all? What do you think?
It's tragic. And that goes to underscore how malicious the intent is. They are taking advantage of the natural empathy that young people have. There is a level of empathy that children have. And because they haven't been hardened to the ways of the world yet. And that's what we mean when we say preserving the innocence of children. That's what I mean. It's not just the sexual innocence of children. It is the fundamental imagination and trust of children and the belief in the good of the world. And so what they're doing, and this is why this is just so harmful, is they're capitalizing on that. They're going in and they're using history and struggles like segregation, the civil rights struggle, and true discrimination, and saying, look what happened to these people. You wouldn't want that to happen to these people here now, would you? And as you said, it's a false equivalency. It's overly elementary, and it is manipulating the natural empathy of the very young child, of an adolescent. And that is how they capture them. And so when the mom or the dad comes back and tries to explain that or say, wait a minute, it's not the same, then they build that divide between parent and child, because now the child is saying, well, wait a minute, mom, dad, you don't care about people. You're bad, they're good. That's another way they're pulling children away from their families. And I will tell you all, this is nothing new under the sun. This is all cult 101 tactics. And I don't mind saying it. This is exactly what cultist organizations do. They find ways to separate people from their loved ones by making them believe that their loved ones are very uncaring people, that they don't understand the plight of either the world or the mission that the cult is trying to accomplish. And so that's what I mean in terms of preserving the innocence of children.
You know, this kind of language, jargon has always been used to make people feel dumb and unqualified to speak on something. It makes us feel like we don't belong in the conversation. And you may be a victim of this. You who thinks they're not good enough, you're not articulate, you're not good enough to use, you don't use this kind of neat language or organize it in a way that's very impressive. You feel like your ideas don't belong there in that conversation, that if you were to really come out and speak like this, that you wouldn't be able to get the job done, that you're not good enough in that exchange. All of this, it's like an unfortunate trick that we play on ourselves. It's like self-robbery, honestly. And it's like, no, please be confident. Try to be confident in what you do know. Even if you don't have the right words to say something, it doesn't mean you're not right in the way you're thinking. Please be confident in your ability to present what you do have, and confident that you can acquire the words and phrases and all the rhetorical techniques that you don't have to do it in the way that you want to do it. A lot of us we're like awed and struck by language or a very, I don't know, charismatic or distinguished way that someone presents. But if what you're saying is true, like, speak the truth. That is the primary. That is first and foremost, because your voice may be the one that we need to hear the most. Okay, not mine, not all these people that can give you a PhD and all this. Your voice may be the one that is most needed. So lawyers got their jargon, doctors got their jargon, and it stops us from saying, wait a minute, like, I know this law has 1,000 pages, but I just don't believe that you can come tell me what to do. If we just had the confidence to say that, because that's what it comes down to. Like, we get really mesmerized with all the technical stuff. assuming that just because something has a nice, is very decorated and very distinguished, we assume that it has the same kind of substance inside of it as the presentation on the outside suggests. And impressive language, it makes young people today, that like that language of having that jargon when it comes to transgender health and all of the genders and all of these kind of phrases, right? The people that jump onto that, it makes them think that they know more about life than the older generation, and it's an illusion. It's an illusion that the people that they know more, but really they're just filled with a lot of jargon without a logical foundation. It's just like Marxism. It's like a lot of jargon, proletariat, class struggle, my comrades, means of production, free love, labor capital. At the end of the day, let's keep it simple. What is Marxism? What is socialism? You want equal outcomes for unequal effort. In other words, you want separation from the laws of nature. You want to be free from the laws of cause and effect. It's very simple and plain. As for what she said with civil rights struggles, I like the point, but I would point out that, remember, it was the plan all along. The plan was in motion back then. The stuff about, integrating black men and women into the society, that was like the free drink. It was like the free bag to get you hooked emotionally on government intervention in social relations. This is what people that want to get into your life and they want to basically take from your life. They want to take a parasitical role in your life. They will do 1 or 2 or 3 nice things for you. So then you trust them. They get on your good side, and then they will start to take. Then they will really start to do their damage. Moving on, I also love the point about weaponized empathy, and there's a lot of that. Again, that's what a shared language does. It makes people feel the same emotions because they're using the same kind of language. They're resonating with the same ideas. And yes, it is called tactics. I love that she said called tactics. It just blows my mind that this video is up there, because I really think it's good. Like, for a person that's not in the conspiracy circle, this is really good. And she talks about cult tactics, separating the kids from their parents. That's what it is. Having a shared language that presents an us versus them worldview, right? Then presenting this grand universal mission or aspiration. Absolutely, that's called techniques. And all of that is like in the first 20 minutes of an hour-long interview. If you listen to it, she talks about then getting the death threats, and then that campaign where they put almost $1 million into her opponent to make sure that she does not get reelected. I strongly recommend listening to it, because you actually get to hear how it works in the state legislature. We kind of don't have that look into that. I appreciated that. And then she talks about how someone told her that she shouldn't oppose the agenda because, and this is a white person that told her, I remember back when your people couldn't marry my people. And this is why I was like, yeah, it didn't surprise me at all. And I've said this a lot before. People think that racism comes from the bottom, from the uneducated masses. And while there's a lot of ignorance, racism comes from the top. It's always been the elites of society, because they are the materialists. They are obsessed with heredity and genetics, and interbreeding and the keeping of genetics, social Darwinism, all of that. It comes from them, from these ruling classes. And look, I started the episode with that racial aspect, and I know people roll their eyes at that, but it's all going to come full circle here. And she is going to use race to make the key point of this whole show, like the most hardcore point. And here we go.
I said, well, what makes you think that ultimately when this, if these people succeed and this becomes mainstream and accepted, which it already is right now, obviously we're fighting it, that this won't be in the African American community at high levels. We see it already. And then I talked to him about the dark history, and this is what they didn't want me to talk about, of the castration of Black males. That took place during slavery. It was a very dark time where Black men were intentionally castrated, so that they were no threat to sleeping with white women.
Gee.
And they would use them, and it's called buck breaking.
Wow.
To
like how they talk about horses or cattle.
That's
right?
exactly
Isn't
right.
that?
And so Black men have been castrated, and they would felt like they would be safe in certain areas. And the fact that it's shocking to me that a party, these progressives who claim they're for human rights, would be pushing this. And I know for a fact, and I've had this conversation in the Black community, and said, if it were Republicans pushing this, what would you call this?
Yeah.
And you know what they said? Genocide.
Wow.
Jesus.
They would say this was an intentional, slow form of genocide by castrating the Black males first, sterilizing the Black girls so they don't have a menstrual cycle, which means they cannot procreate, which would be a form of depopulation, to eradicate the race ultimately.
And that's it. And that's the show. If you listen to this entire episode that I'm going to link, you can hear one of the hosts at the end, Stella O'Malley, say that this is the way forward. Say it straight and keep saying it. The way Shawn Thierry does. It's genocide. That's what I've been saying. And don't be embarrassed. That's what I'd like to say. Don't be embarrassed to say it. Embarrassment is so often used against the victims of crime. The criminal's not embarrassed. He doesn't feel any shame. He just does his crime as long as he gets what he wants. He's happy. But what happens is they keep the victim silent by putting all the shame and the embarrassment on them to stop them from being exposed. So they make them believe that they're the ones who should be ashamed and embarrassed if they were to actually say what happened, right? Because if they say it, then they'll be exposed. A very unfortunate technique. It's like the other side of the coin of weaponized empathy, right? That this is another thing. It's using your loving emotional inclinations to your own detriment. And that's what I wanted to say to finish it off. I think this is the most important and best This Week in Tyranny in a long time. Maybe it was a little bit rushed. I knew it was going to be like an hour without the clips. But I hope you guys think so too, that it's valuable, because I think it's really valuable information. So I thank you for giving it a chance, because your presence matters. Ultimately, presence is what drives the world. It's whether you choose to be right here or right now. Like, are you going to be here, or are you going to be distracted by the noise on the other side of the door? We've got the gift of life and the gift of our presence and attention. And if we really focus on something 100%, that is when we make magic happen. So there you go. That's This Week in Tyranny. Thank you so much again. I'll see you next week.